Your phone hits 2%. You're in an unfamiliar part of town. And something in your chest tightens. Your heart rate climbs. Your palms go damp. For a fraction of a second, some part of you genuinely believes you are in danger. You are not in danger. Nothing is hunting you. Nothing is about to kill you. And yet, the alarm going off inside your skull right now is not a glitch. It's a feature. A feature installed roughly 300,000 years ago, running on hardware that has barely changed since, in a world that has changed almost completely. Somewhere inside your brain, right now, there is a small almond-shaped structure that does not know what a phone is. It does not know what a deadline is, what a text message left on read means, or why a stranger's opinion online should matter at all. All it knows is one job: keep you alive. And it is still doing that job, exactly as if you were standing in that grass. So today, we're going to answer a question that sounds simple, but genuinely is not. What is fear, actually? Where did it come from? Why does it misfire so badly in the modern world? And why, after everything, agriculture, cities, the internet, therapy, medication, have we still not managed to update the software running the most powerful survival system evolution ever built? Let's go through it properly. Let's start with the least glamorous but most important part of this story, the actual biology. Fear is not an emotion in the way we usually think of emotions, a feeling that floats around vaguely inside you. Fear is a survival circuit, a physical, measurable, extremely fast chain reaction that happens inside your body whether you want it to or not. Here's the sequence. A threat appears, a shape, a sound, a shadow. That information hits your eyes or ears first, and within milliseconds it takes two different roads through your brain. One road is slow and careful. It goes through the thinking part of your brain, the cortex, which analyzes the situation properly. Is that actually a snake, or is it a stick? The other road is fast, recklessly fast. It skips the careful analysis entirely and goes straight to the amygdala, which doesn't ask questions, it just reacts. This is sometimes called the low road, and neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux, who mapped much of this circuitry, found that this fast pathway can trigger a full fear response in a fraction of the time it takes the slow, accurate pathway to even finish processing the image. In other words, your body can be jumping backward, heart already racing, adrenaline already dumping into your bloodstream, before the rational part of your brain has even confirmed there's anything to be afraid of. You've probably felt this: the jump at a rustling bush, the gasp at a shadow that turns out to be a coat on a hook. That's not you being irrational. That's 300,000 years of natural selection favoring the organisms that reacted first and asked questions later. And here's the detective work that makes this fascinating. Researchers didn't just theorize this, they proved it, using patients with damaged amygdalae. One famous case, a woman researchers referred to as patient SM, had a rare condition that destroyed both sides of her amygdala. Researchers tried everything to frighten her. Haunted houses, snakes, spiders, horror films, nothing worked. She reported curiosity, not fear. Her fast road had been physically deleted. This is the clearest proof we have that fear isn't a personality trait or a mood. It's hardware. Remove the hardware and the experience of fear disappears completely, even when every reason to feel it is right in front of you. So that's the machine. Now let's talk about why evolution built it in the first place, and why it built it the way it did. For roughly 300,000 years, Homo sapiens lived in small, mobile groups, navigating a world with real, immediate, physical threats: predators, starvation, injury with no antibiotics, exposure, violence from rival groups. In that world, the amygdala's job was straightforward: scan constantly for danger, react instantly, ask questions later. And here's the part that explains almost everything about how fear behaves today. This system evolved under what researchers call asymmetric risk. If you hear a rustle in the grass, and it's nothing, and you flinch anyway, you've wasted a tiny bit of energy. Mildly embarrassing, biologically speaking. But if you hear a rustle in the grass, assume it's nothing, and it turns out to be a predator, you're dead. Game over. No more genes passed on. Evolution doesn't optimize for accuracy. It optimizes for survival. And when the cost of a false alarm is nearly zero, but the cost of a missed threat is death, natural selection will always favor the paranoid system over the calm, accurate one. This is why your brain is, by design, a chronic overreactor. Not a flaw, a feature that kept your ancestors alive long enough to become your ancestors. Now here's the rehook, because this is where the story gets genuinely strange. That system was calibrated for a specific environment, one with maybe a few genuine, life-threatening triggers per week. A predator sighting, a confrontation with a rival group, a dangerous river crossing. The system was built to fire hard, but rarely. Now compare that to a single modern morning, a news notification about a disaster on the other side of the planet, an aggressive email from your boss, a near miss in traffic, an argument on social media, a worrying symptom you Googled at 1 a.m. Each one of these can trigger the exact same ancient circuitry, the same amygdala, the same adrenaline, the same fast road, dozens of times a day, every single day, for an entire lifetime. The hardware never got a firmware update. It's still running the same threat detection code it ran 300,000 years ago, except now the threats are mostly symbolic, social, or digital, and they never stop coming. This mismatch has a name in psychology and evolutionary biology. It's often referred to as an evolutionary mismatch, and fear may be the single clearest example of it in the entire human body. So the question becomes, if the wiring is this old, how do we actually learn what to be afraid of? Is fear something we're born with, or something the group teaches us? That answer turns out to be more interesting than either option alone. Not all fear is created equal. Some of it is hardwired before birth. Some of it has to be taught. And the difference between the two tells us a lot about which ancient dangers were common enough and dangerous enough to get burned directly into our DNA. Take snakes and spiders. Multiple studies, including work using infants as young as a few months old, show that human babies detect images of snakes faster than neutral objects and show heightened attention to spider-like shapes long before they could have learned to fear them through experience. This isn't universal for every dangerous thing in nature. It's specific, and that specificity is the clue. Snakes and venomous spiders killed a meaningful number of hominins across millions of years of shared primate evolutionary history, long before humans existed at all. Some researchers argue this fear response predates Homo sapiens by millions of years, inherited from earlier primate ancestors who lived alongside constant reptilian threats in the trees and undergrowth. But now compare that to something like the fear of guns, cars, or electrical outlets, all objectively far more dangerous to a modern human than a spider will ever be. Babies show no innate fear of any of these. None. They have to be taught, usually through a mix of direct instruction and observing the reactions of trusted adults. This gap is the whole story in miniature. Evolution is slow. It takes tens of thousands of years, at minimum, to hardwire a fear response into a species' baseline programming. Cars have existed for about 130 years. Evolution hasn't even begun to catch up. Which means, statistically, you should probably be far more afraid of driving to work than of the spider in your bathtub. And your gut feeling tells you the exact opposite. This is called prepared learning by psychologists. The idea that we're biologically preloaded to learn certain fears almost instantly, while other, statistically more dangerous things require deliberate, repeated teaching to register as threatening at all. Your brain isn't calibrated to real-world risk. It's calibrated to ancestral risk, and those two things have drifted enormously far apart. Now, here's where things get socially fascinating, because prepared fears aren't just about predators. There's another entire category of ancient threat that shaped our fear circuitry just as powerfully, and it has nothing to do with teeth or venom at all. Ask most people what they're afraid of, and you'll get spiders, heights, the dark, maybe public speaking. But dig a little deeper into the psychology of public speaking specifically, and you find something strange. Surveys have repeatedly found that fear of public speaking ranks among the most commonly reported fears in modern populations, in some surveys rated as more distressing than the fear of death itself. That makes no logical sense on the surface. Standing in front of a room and talking cannot physically kill you, so why does the body respond as though it might? The answer traces back to one of the most dangerous things that could happen to a person in a small hunter-gatherer band: social rejection. For nearly all of human history, survival was not an individual project. It was a group project. Food, protection, childcare, defense, all of it depended on being embedded in a cooperative group. Being cast out of that group, exiled or shunned, wasn't a bruised ego. It was, very literally, a potential death sentence. No group meant no shared food, no protection from predators, no help during illness or injury. So evolution wired the fear of social rejection directly alongside the fear of physical predators, using, according to a substantial body of neuroscience research, including work by psychologist Naomi Eisenberger, overlapping neural pathways. Her research found that social rejection activates regions of the brain, including the anterior cingulate cortex, that are also involved in processing physical pain. Being excluded and being physically hurt aren't just similar metaphorically. Your brain processes them through genuinely overlapping circuitry. This is the actual mechanism behind stage fright, embarrassment, the sting of being left on red, the dread of an awkward silence in conversation. Standing on a stage in front of strangers activates the same ancient alarm as standing in front of your entire tribe, facing the possibility of judgment, ridicule, or exile. Because for most of human history, those two situations were functionally the same event. And this is also why humiliation feels so disproportionately catastrophic in the moment. Tripping in public, saying the wrong thing, being laughed at. Your rational brain knows nobody will remember it in a week. Your amygdala does not know that. Your amygdala is still operating as though the entire survival of your genetic line depends on this group's continued approval. So now we've covered the two major categories: the fear of physical threats and the fear of social exile. But there's a third piece to this puzzle, and it might be the most psychologically important one: how fear actually spreads between people. Because it turns out you don't have to personally experience a threat to become afraid of it. Imagine you're part of an ancient hunting party, and one member returns badly injured, describing an encounter with a predator near a specific watering hole. You didn't see the predator. You weren't attacked. But from that moment forward, you avoid that watering hole with exactly the same intensity as someone who barely escaped with their life. This is social transmission of fear, and it is a spectacularly efficient survival mechanism, because it means an entire group can learn a danger from a single individual's experience, without every member having to personally risk their life to acquire that knowledge. Researchers studying observational fear learning have found that both humans and other primates can acquire a full-blown fear response simply by watching someone else react fearfully to a stimulus. No direct danger required at all. This is efficient. It's also, in the modern world, a serious liability, because the mechanism doesn't care whether the watching happens around a real campfire or through a screen showing you a curated stream of the most alarming stories on the planet, 24 hours a day, sourced from every corner of the globe rather than your own immediate valley. Ancestrally, your fear transmission network was small, maybe 30 to 150 people, the typical size of a hunter-gatherer band. If something genuinely dangerous happened, it was local, and it was rare enough that fear stayed roughly proportional to actual risk. Today, that network is roughly the size of the entire connected world, and it never sleeps, and it is frequently optimized, deliberately, algorithmically, to maximize exactly the emotional response your amygdala evolved to prioritize above almost everything else. This is not a coincidence, and it's not a conspiracy either. It's simply an old survival mechanism meeting a new information environment it was never built to handle. Fear-based content spreads faster and gets remembered more vividly than neutral content because your amygdala is doing exactly the job evolution assigned it, paying disproportionate attention to anything that looks like danger and remembering it in vivid detail so you don't make the same mistake twice. So your ancient fear transmission software, built for a tribe of maybe 150 people sharing rare, locally relevant dangers, is now plugged into a network broadcasting curated worst-case scenarios from the entire planet, continuously, forever. It's no wonder so many people report feeling more anxious than any generation in recorded history, despite living, by nearly every objective global measure, in the safest and healthiest period our species has ever experienced. So what happens when this ancient system, built for occasional, sharp bursts of threat, gets triggered constantly, for years, without ever fully resolving? This is where fear stops being a helpful survival tool and starts becoming something closer to a malfunction. Not because the system is broken, but because it's doing exactly what it was built to do, in an environment that never lets it stand down. In the ancestral environment, a fear response was almost always followed by resolution. You spotted the predator. You ran or fought or hid, and within minutes, one way or another, it was over. Your body could return to baseline. Cortisol and adrenaline levels would fall. The system reset itself, ready for the next acute threat. Chronic modern stressors don't offer that resolution. A difficult financial situation, an unresolved conflict at work, an ongoing health worry, a doom-scrolling habit. These keep the threat detection system activated for weeks, months, sometimes years, without ever hitting that safe, threat is over signal the ancient brain is waiting for. Sustained activation of this system has real physiological costs. Elevated cortisol over long periods has been linked in research to impaired memory function, suppressed immune response, and cardiovascular strain. In other words, the very system designed to keep you alive in short bursts can, when never allowed to switch off, quietly work against your long-term health. And this is the honest, complicated truth at the center of this entire story. The system isn't defective. It's ancient. It was calibrated with extraordinary precision for a world that mostly no longer exists, and it has had absolutely no opportunity, in evolutionary terms, to adapt to the world we've built instead. Here's the question everyone actually wants answered by this point. If this system is this old, this deep, this hardwired, can it actually be changed? Or are we just permanently stuck reacting to modern, mostly harmless situations with Stone Age intensity? The honest answer is, not completely, but more than you'd think. The amygdala's fast road can't be deleted, and you wouldn't want it to be. Patient SM. Remember, the woman with amygdala damage lived a life with real, sometimes dangerous consequences from her total absence of fear. Some fear is protective. The goal was never to eliminate the alarm system. It's to recalibrate what sets it off, and how long it stays activated. This is where the modern understanding of exposure and extinction learning becomes genuinely useful. Research on fear extinction, repeatedly and safely encountering a feared stimulus without the predicted catastrophe occurring, shows that the brain can build new, competing pathways that suppress the original fear response, even though the original fear memory is never fully erased. It's less like deleting a file and more like building a new road that the brain increasingly prefers to use instead. This is also why simply knowing that a fear is irrational almost never makes it go away, because the fast road doesn't communicate with the logical, reasoning part of your brain. You cannot argue your amygdala out of an alarm. You can only, through repeated safe experience, teach it a new pattern over time. And on the social and informational side, the same principle that made fear spread so efficiently through ancient tribes can be consciously interrupted. Deliberately limiting exposure to a constant, algorithmically amplified stream of worst-case scenarios isn't avoidance. It's simply recognizing that your fear transmission network was calibrated for a tribe of 150, not a planet of billions, and adjusting your intake accordingly. So here's where this actually leaves us. The jolt you feel at 2% battery in an unfamiliar place, the dread before a presentation, the disproportionate sting of being left on red, the doom scroll you can't quite put down. None of it is a personal weakness. All of it is 300,000 years of extraordinarily effective survival engineering, still running, still doing exactly what it was built to do, just aimed, most of the time now, at threats that were never supposed to exist. Your ancestors who felt too little fear didn't survive long enough to pass that trait on. The ones who felt fear intensely, reacted instantly, and remembered vividly, they're the reason you exist at all. Every irrational jump at a shadow, every unnecessary spike of anxiety over something harmless is an inheritance. Evidence that the system worked so well for so long that it's still here, fully intact, inside you, right now. That's not a flaw in the design. That's the design working exactly as intended, in a world it was never designed for.